All right, hello, good evening. So this video is specifically made for my students that are offering medical psychology, introduction to medical psychology, LLA campus in the 2024-2025 academic session. This is second semester. And so I'm dropping these tips to enable it. I promised you to do a revision, but unfortunately I couldn't. So that's the reason why I decided that, okay, let me make this video so that I'll upload for you guys so you can go through it and see how the questions, or see that will guide you on how you can read, and then probably help you in channeling your thought towards the exam. So you remember that I taught you introduction to psychology, right? Yes, the first part of our lesson was, our class, so to say, was on introduction to psychology, where we talked about the definition of psychology, where it comes from two Greek words, that the psyche and logos, which means knowledge or study, and mind or soul. Psyche means mind or soul, then logos meaning study or knowledge. So we also talked about generally the four goals of psychology, where you talk about observing and describing behavior, explaining behavior, predicting behavior, and then finally controlling behavior. And of course, we said that behaviors are generally divided into two, right? We have the overt and then the covert behaviors. And so after talking a general introduction on psychology, we discussed what medical psychology is, or medical psychology. If you remember, in one of our conversations, we made fun of that. Medical psychology, where we talked about medical psychology. So we explain what that is, and then we'll talk about applying psychological principles in the treatment of illnesses. And this is the area where we said that, of course, illnesses are not just physical things alone, or physical aspect of what happens to an individual. There are several aspects of things that happen to people. We talk about the mental aspect, the physical aspect, the emotional aspect, and so on and so forth. And I think that is where we came about the concept of psychobiological aspect of treatment, where we talk about biopsychosocial model, where theories of biological, psychological, and social aspect of individual well-being are combined in the treatment of an individual. We also talked about basically three components. You remember we talked about three components that constitutes abnormality, right? And if you remember, we talked about deviance, we talked about dysfunction, and then we talked about distress. I would say that behavior can be classified as abnormal when it is actually causing somebody to deviate from the norms of the society. That's where deviance comes in. And when it is causing the individual distress, or when it is making the individual not to function well, that's where dysfunction comes in. And we said it has to be consistent for a period of a number of months. I think 6 months or so, 3 months or so, that what we said in our conversation. And so these are some of the things we discussed from there. So we also discussed the DSM. I know you remember that, right? The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorder. And we talked about when it was published by the American Psychological Association. And we said it has been coming in versions, different versions. And there is a current version now that psychologists are using. We also talked about, the fact that so I'm sorry for the break in transmission. We've had light issues for some time, so I have to look for a way so that I will make sure I get this done this night because I learned that you're having the exam tomorrow. I'm so sorry for posting it late, but I know that it will be of great help to you, especially for those of you that will watch it. So, we talked about psychological disorders that are characterized by, that was when, after the DSM, I remember that was when we started talking about psychological disorders. And from the psychological disorders, we talked about a whole lot of them. Of course, you remember, we talked about psychological disorders that are characterized by sudden attacks of anxiety and terror, anxiety disorders, right? So we talked about a lot of them. We talked about fears. We talked about phobias. And then we talked about depression. We made mention of several symptoms of depression. In the course of our conversation, we also made mention of personality disorders. And I think we said it has about 3 clusters. Cluster A, cluster B, cluster C, right? Very good. So we talked about those clusters and certain disorders that are classified under each cluster. All right. Okay. So I remember we talked about that. So you'll be conscious of getting these things into place. Now we also talked about eating disorders. Unfortunately, I remember I didn't discuss eating disorders in details because of want of time. We were supposed to come to class and discuss it. You were supposed to study it and then discuss it. All right. But unfortunately, I couldn't meet up with the timing because of 1 or 2 things that I was supposed to do at that point in time. So I couldn't meet up. But then I told you to study it, right? So I'm still telling you, you get that also in place, and then you have an understanding about it too. All right, clusters of personality, I've mentioned that already. So I've also mentioned some aspects of biopsychosocial model. I remember telling you something about an individual suffering from multiple psychological disorders at a particular point in time. Am I correct? Yes, sir, because I know I mentioned it. And what was the word I used? I said it is called what? Comorbidity. All right? Yes, comorbidity. I told you about that. And I said comorbidity occurs when somebody suffering from one psychological disorder also suffers from another. Of course, sometimes these symptoms could be intertwined. Because, for instance, when somebody who is suffering from schizoid personality disorder is likely to have symptoms of schizophrenia, especially the aspect of schizophrenia called paranoid. So some of these things that you see people suffer from one aspect of a psychological disorder, the symptoms can also be traced to another psychological disorder. So I think I've made mention of all these things, and I made mention of that. Now again, I think I remember talking about remember eating disorders. I made mention of that in class. All right, but I didn't teach it, but I told you to study it. And I also said we are coming to class to discuss it. I said I will appoint people to discuss it, but unfortunately we couldn't do that. But I'm still telling you now, you look at the eating disorders and try to place them. I remember I also gave you a material. Am I correct? Yes, I sent the material to you. So I don't think that would be an excuse for anybody. Our phobias, you remember them, right? We talked about acrophobia, agoraphobia, arachnophobia, astrophobia, claustrophobia, xenophobia, mesophobia, and so many other, even zoophobia. We talked about them, all right? Yeah, so these are some of the things you need to, put them into consideration as you study. I know that with this video and then with the few conversations we've had in class over the past few months, I don't think anybody should have anything less than an A in this course. In fact, anybody that has anything less than an A in that course is owing me 50,000. That is the bet. If you have less than A in that course, you are going to pay me 50,000. God bless you all, and I wish you success in your exams. Thank you, and remain blessed. I remain Mr. Pig, Jacob Eagle.